Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Tuesday night special report. It really is a special report tonight as we bring you brand new news about what's going on in the January 6th investigation and the hearings going on in Capitol Hill. Hello, Eric Garland. How are you? It's good to see you again.
Hello. It's very special.
It's just, I am a little bit, this is all momentous stuff that we're all discovering, and it's momentous information that we're sharing with people tonight. It's momentous information that the Jan 6 committee has been sharing with the nation. It is a moment of joy, actually, and I don't want us to forget that. It is an important triumph of justice that we are finally getting to hear these important facts, these important narratives that America has been needing to hear for so long, and finally now we're getting to hear it. It is so important. It's such a point of victory, and sure, it involves a lot of tension, and sure, it involves allegations against people that they might not like, but truthfully, this is the moment that America gets saved. This is the moment that the American Constitution stands up and rule of law stands up. And I think we can't forget that. So I'm going to say it is still special. It's still very joyous. And we're going to continue to provide as much detail and as much information as we can as we've learned new things about who funded Jan 6, who was behind all the people involved in Jan 6, and also brand new information this evening from the committee vice chairman herself, Liz Cheney, who just posted a video a short while ago online. But before we do that, we should also talk about some other things. I see. Do I care? I guess I care. Lauren Bobart has a history as an unlicensed paid escort, according to somebody.
I don't know what the licensure board is like, but yeah, there was some scuttlebutt about that. Apparently, a history selling certain services. I don't know. No doubt consistent with family values. So.
Yeah, and apparently she met Senator Ted Cruz in Aspen through the Koch family member escort client. Okay, I don't know. This is who knows? Who knows? I haven't checked all this myself. I don't know for sure, but it certainly looks like it's catching a lot of attention online.
I wonder if there might be some revelations that drop here and there, and who knows what the source might be of that kind of thing. As we get towards the truth of January 6th, and some of those people who stepped on the playing field the last minute are pretty useless. If you'll all recall, for as much as airtime as these freshman Congress critters have gotten, like Boebert and Green, who there's nobody less useful in Washington than a first year Congress critter. Like, right. They are just not even door stop or speed bump level of utility in Washington. And they, of course, got all this attention because, well, the first thing they did was roll into town and announce that they wanted to wear pistols onto the floor of the Capitol just prior to an attempted violent coup d'etat. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, not exactly Daniel Patrick Moynihan or Abraham Lincoln in terms of statesmanship.
Not a good look, really, at all, under any circumstances, and just there to rile up the opposition. Remember, there was a real credible feeling among some people, in AOC specifically, worried about her life because these congressmen were arriving into the jobs, into the halls of Congress with weapons on them, rightly so. I would be worried too under these circumstances that, they should at least be able to enter workplace where there's a lot of tension and political discussion going on without fearing that their opposite numbers have weapons strapped to themselves. So
real quick, do you know where they have a really tight control of firearms at work? Like a fucking Marine barracks, an army base. You're not allowed to just fucking carry guns wherever you want. That's the people that shoot you to death for a living. And you're not allowed to just carry guns all over the place. I mean, this is where all the, it starts with Applebee's. It's like, oh, we should be able to carry weapons at Applebee's. You're not allowed to do that on an army base. Mm. You're not allowed to carry, you want to own your own gun. They're going to keep it in a locker,
Yeah, they can bring the guns in. Apparently, they just have to store them somewhere, and that's not okay for them. Apparently, they wanted to walk right in there, so they could see eye to eye as they're
They were trying to puncture the bubble of no, it's okay to bring firearms near your elected officials. There's no other place on earth, maybe Somalia, where that kind of thing flies, and it's not the same kind of.
And the rules are the rules.
Government
The
we
rules
want to
are the
run.
rules. The rules are the rules. No matter where you are, you follow the rules because those are them. That's how society runs. If the rules tell you no guns, don't bring your guns to work. Okay, it's as simple
There are
as
no
that.
firearms allowed in DC unless your first name is Secret and your last name is Service.
Right.
There's some notable exceptions, but there's no guns in DC. I gather you can get some permits even as a Congress critter, but there's security details. I mean, there was no need for it. It was just to clear the way for, hey guys, come on, I'm doing it. I'll be armed. Why don't you come here and be armed too? And maybe shoot Nancy Pelosi in the back.
Look, I think what we've learned through these last few years is that this entire MAGA movement has been filled with people who are there to gaslight a nation, to really damage who we are as a nation, and then also create as much polarization, as much violence, as much tension as possible. And while doing that, get away with doing a lot of criming behind the scenes, which I think, it's one thing going in and causing a lot of gaslighting and, hey, look at us, controversy. That's one thing. But when you're doing that to cover up for the fact that you're stealing millions of dollars, then it's getting to a point of complete disgust. I mean, it's just like it's a point where you can't accept it at all. I mean, politicians are allowed to say whatever they want to say. If they feel like they want to gaslight, go ahead. But when they're doing that to cover up the crimes that their fellow politicians are doing, as we found out last night about January the 6th, there's one thing that was missing in a lot of the coverage yesterday. Yeah, there were three things that came out of yesterday's really important hearing. I hope everybody goes and watches it, listens to it very carefully. They wanted you to know, firstly, that Donald Trump knew that he lost the election, that he planned, regardless of whether he lost the election or not, to say that the election was stolen from him, that it was a lie. That all his staff, all his key staffers told him he had stolen that he had lost the election, and anything he might do to suggest otherwise would be stupid and folly and possibly illegal.
Yep.
And then he still went ahead with it. And then there was the and but at the end, which I was just like, and he raised $250 million off this whole thing.
Where'd that come from?
$250 million that he pocketed by himself, didn't get it spent on anything. Well, gave it to some people, gave it to Mark Meadows, gave Mark Meadows $1 million, gave, Ivanka, Jared some money, who knows? But everybody else didn't get any money because there was no defense of those frauds, because guess what? The frauds weren't really there. So he pocketed the money.
Sure.
So this is money from supporters of Donald Trump that he stole on the way out the door, while gaslighting an entire country into feeling that the Constitution was going to be completely damaged and the end of democracy was right here. I mean, we have to understand the kind of people we're dealing with here. These are not good people by any stretch of the imagination. There's no passable grade for anybody who's part of this MAGA world. And, and I think what's being done so well, especially by Liz Cheney, is that she's driving that point home night after night, and she's so credible on this. She's so credible on this one. She put out a video just a short while ago. I'm going to play the full thing. It includes a brand new clip about John Eastman from one of his colleagues, a lawyer. Let's take a listen to Liz Cheney.
Yesterday, the Select Committee's hearing showed all Americans that President Trump's claims of a stolen 2020 election were, to use former Attorney General Barr's words, complete nonsense. We heard this from Donald Trump's own campaign experts, his own campaign lawyers, his own campaign manager, his attorney general, and others Donald Trump appointed to leadership positions in the U.S. Department of Justice. President Trump's advisors knew what he was saying was false, and they told him so directly and repeatedly. The testimony from our first two hearings is available on the Select Committee's website, so all Americans can easily view it. In our next hearing on Thursday, the Select Committee will examine President Trump's relentless effort on January 6th and in the days beforehand to pressure Vice President Pence to refuse to count lawful electoral votes. As a federal judge has indicated, this likely violated 2 federal criminal statutes. President Trump had no factual basis for what he was doing, and he had been told it was illegal. Despite this, President Trump plotted with a lawyer named John Eastman and others to overturn the outcome of the election on January 6th. To give you a sense of the gravity of these issues, here is a clip of one of President Trump's own White House lawyers, Eric Hirschman, who talked to Mr. Eastman the day after January 6th.
It was the day after. Eastman, I don't remember why he called me, and or he texted me or called me, wanted to talk with me, and he said he couldn't reach others. And he started to ask me about something dealing with Georgia and preserving something potentially for appeal. And I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on: orderly transition. And I screamed, I said, I don't want to hear any other effing words coming out of your mouth, no matter what, other than orderly transition. Repeat those words to me. And I screamed, and he said, eventually he said, orderly transition. I said, good, John. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it. And then I hung up on him.
Well, that's that's advice from a lawyer, right? When you're a lawyer getting advice from another lawyer, saying get a criminal defense lawyer.
Well, and do you know what law firm that Eric Hirschman was from?
I do not know.
Kasowitz, Benson, Torres.
Interesting.
New York's bankruptcy experts and Israeli agents. Yeah, I think it was Friedman, the fourth partner there, went off to be Trump's ambassador to Israel.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, no. So look, these folks that are testifying now, let's not confuse them for good people.
Right.
I mean, the reason that they were there, and look, this is the witnesses at every good criminal trial, right? And this is not a trial, but one of the issues is always witness credibility. And when somebody agrees to testify for the government against criminals, usually they knew the criminals. The really good, the really good ones. I mean, you can get some stuff off of forensic evidence from the FBI, wiretaps and, bank records and that stuff. That's why taking them out on tax evasion is so easy. You don't got to go get any witnesses. But if you get somebody to flip who's like, oh no, we were there to rob that bank, that usually seals the case. However, there's always a witness credibility thing because, well, these guys hang out with criminals. Yeah. But of course they do. That's who hangs out with criminals, is other criminals. I think the story of the Jan 6 hearings and maybe the eventual trials will be which criminals just couldn't take it anymore. It's like, it's over, orderly transition, lawyer up, we're all dead. I'm out.
I mean, Bill Barr, as much as, admirably, he gave a very... free-flowing kind of testimony to the committee that we saw yesterday, and we'll show you some of that in a bit as well. But he's still Bill Barr. He's still the same guy who approved some of that crackdown around the Black Lives Matter movement after the George Floyd death. He, there's a lot of question marks. Yeah, there's a lot of questions about how he even got the job. There's a lot of questions about covering up for Mueller, this huge cover-up that he did for Mueller. I mean, those are all black marks almost certainly against Bill Barr. However, I'll welcome him to the table if he's going to say the things he did yesterday against Donald Trump, because the gravity of the situation was so serious that it did take the Attorney General and a bunch of other people and a letter from 11 former defense secretaries to say, hang on, something really, really critical is about to happen in America if we let this go through. I mean, there was a lot of resignations that certainly helped identify for some people that something incredibly serious was about to happen. And in fact, turned out to be correct. In terms of the big lie itself, these are the people that we heard yesterday from Bill Stepien, who described himself as being part of Team Normal. And he said, and I know you've disputed that, and I totally agree with you now, having heard your fine rational arguments as to why he certainly was not Team Normal, but certainly more normal than this crew out here, who seem to be the leading voices in the big lie. And it's John Eastman there in the hat that you see in the bottom row next to Michael Flynn, that lawyer that we just played you, that clip that Liz Cheney just shared with Eric Hirschman. He was referring to John Eastman when he said, get yourself a criminal defense lawyer because you're in that much trouble. And in fact, and now a court judge has agreed with that, saying, this was illegal. This was illegal stuff. And so this man...
Central District of California, when they were arguing over privilege, one of the things that pierces privilege is the crime fraud exception. And the court was actually very generous towards Eastman on whether or not he really had a client there, whether or not there really was upcoming litigation, or if it was just for propaganda purposes, which is what the Jan 6 committee argued, et cetera, and so on. And then the crime fraud, and then of course this isn't privileged because this is part of a crime. And the judge gave almost every single point to Eastman and said, no, well, we're going to draw all inferences in the most favorable light to him on whether this was a client or whether there might have been a lawsuit coming up. Oh, but this is definitely criminal. So
right.
Turn him over the emails, asshole.
It's incredibly damning. And of course, this is Donald Trump's chief accomplice. This is the guy who basically plotted all of this with the former president of the United States. This was the guy who came up with a plan. This was the guy who consulted regularly with Trump on what should be done and shouldn't be done. This is a guy who seemed to, on one week, think that none of this was legal, and then the following week came up with a strategy that, hey, maybe now it is legal. And then he's surrounded by all these other buffoons who, Rudy Giuliani with his ridiculous allegations night after night on every media outlet and press conferences with Sidney Powell. Again, ludicrous allegations, made up allegations. And then, it included people like Ginny Thomas, which I still think is one of the most remarkable, people involved in an attempted coup of the United States of America, is the wife of the sitting justice of the Supreme Court. Still, to this very day.
Yep.
She is one of the chief organizers of an attempt to overthrow the Constitution of the United States and the ruling, the incoming president.
Yep.
And then Cleta Mitchell, which we will talk a lot about tonight, because I've been doing a little bit of digging around. Do we have to? Well, you'll like some of this, I'm afraid. Or you might not like some of it, but I think it's interesting. I've been doing a lot of digging around Cleta Mitchell's history and about what she's been involved in. She's been involved in that company with Steve Bannon's sister. And because, who's heard of Steve Bannon's sister? I haven't heard of Steve Bannon's sister.
He has siblings? That gets rid of my spore theory.
Well, I also, I was surprised. I've not seen very much about her at all, but that she was involved in politics, that she was actually involved in a not-for-profit that mysteriously in 2018 got $4.4 million invested into it out of nowhere. That money that was used to create documentaries for Bannon about President Trump and Xi, the Chinese premier.
Is this Mitchell or his sister?
Both. They were both involved in the same organization. She was the secretary, Cleta Mitchell, because she's actually quite close to Bannon. Now, so this is one of those organizations that you look at. You know what this organization was? You'll remember this. Remember that Fund the Wall campaign thing that suddenly Bannon was like, oh yeah, we're gonna fund the wall.
Yeah, there were a bunch of indictments over it. Who can forget?
Those indictments involved this particular company that Cleta Mitchell was the secretary of, and that Bannon's sister was working on. And
okay, you're right. I like it.
It's pretty interesting.
Cleta Mitchell was involved with the We Build the Wall thing.
Yeah, which clearly was an illegal event. Like that's an illegal company, at least. I'm going to tell you lots about her. We got lots to talk about her later on.
Okay.
I just don't want to jump the shark here, because I do want to remind everyone of another key thing that happened last night, which is the testimony of what really happened on January the 3rd. So the election night, people are at the White House, and this incredible testimony that they were able to get from Ivanka, from Bill Barr, from a number of people, and from Jared Kushner. And I really want you to listen to what Jared Kushner has to say here, because I think Jared sort of steps in it a little bit. While he's trying to be all snarky and covering up for himself, he actually steps in it because he sort of admits that he wasn't doing what we know he was doing, which is basically stealing the campaign funds. So let's take a listen, if we can here. I want to make sure it's got the right one. I believe this is the one. Oh. We're going to risk something here. Let's see what happens when I play it. This looks like Liz Cheney talking about the January 6th. No, it's not. Okay, so I don't have the one I was going to play. So because I don't want to just belabor this point, let's talk a little bit more about Cleta Mitchell, because then we'll just get we'll pick up a little bit later on, and we'll find the tape, and it'll be no problem. So let's introduce everyone to Cleta, because you remember we showed you this slide recently. This is Cleta's wonderful world. She's Bannon's lawyer. She's Lisa Nelson, who is Alec, the Koch-funded.
Okay.
Yeah, she's also on the Council for National Policy. You remember the Council for National Policy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Those two
Cleta's
shits,
on that board there. She seems to be in that video, people say, with Enrique Tarrio and with Stuart Rhodes of the first. Stuart Rhodes of the. Remind me again. I can't get this right for some reason.
Oath Keepers.
Oath Keepers. Thank you.
Prison bait.
It is like something in my head. Those two things
The
will not
remanded
connect.
to custody.
Right. And then she's also, she's very close to Ginny, as we've mentioned, Virginia Thomas, the wife of the Supreme Court. And she's also on that call with Donald Trump when he's talking to Raffensperger in Georgia, demanding that they find him the 11,000, whatever votes. She's on that call with Donald Trump. So she's actually a very key witness, if not a key participant, in that shakedown of a Georgia Secretary of State to try and find extra votes for Donald Trump so he could win the election. She also has this unusual position now that she's appointed by Donald Trump to the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. This is an actual American institution. This is a government institution which she is going to be sitting on as a board member all the way through to 2023, because this is the commission that does independent, it helps people understand how to vote, basically. They tell people about election official security, about the chain of custody, best practices, election audits across the country. Guess who appointed her to that position last minute before leaving the White House? Donald Trump. This is a very conflicted person to be on a committee like that. I mean, she is, not only seen in a garage meeting with Tarrio and Stuart Rhodes, she's, Bannon's buddy, she's Ginny Thomas's buddy, and Donald Trump's buddy, and she's also going to be telling people how to vote come the next few elections and be an actual official. So it is interesting that she is that person. But the one that I really wanted to focus on was her what she does with the lovely Lisa Nelson of Alex. So I'm going to show you a quick clip here. Not a clip, I'll just read you this whole thing, or some of this thing. Where basically, this is when Lisa Nelson was describing how she had decided that it was time to turn the attention of the population to challenging the electoral college vote. So we've been focused on the national vote, and obviously we all want President Trump to win and win the national vote, but it's very clear from all the comments and all the suggestions up front that really what it comes down to is the states and the state legislators. Her organization, she told them, had already drafted a model resolution to make sure there's no confusion among conservative legislators around national popular vote and the electoral college. Fair enough. Nelson noted that her group was exploring additional ways to invalidate a potential Trump loss in consultation with 3 election experts, including CNP Board of Governors member Cleta Mitchell, who I know you all know, on trying to identify what are those action items that legislators can take in their states. And I think that they've identified a few. They can write a letter to the Secretary of State questioning the validity of an election and saying, what did happen that night? So we're drafting a lot of those things. If you have ideas in that area, let us know, and we'll get them to the state legislators, and they can start a kind of exercise to exercise their political muscle in that area. This is months before anyone was challenging the election. This is months before the Cleta Mitchell and Lisa Nelson were already building a campaign to challenge the results.
Absolutely.
Stunning. Yeah. Stunning.
Yeah. I mean, they knew. And the whole point, a lot of these people answer to foreign powers. So what they really want is for the American elections to seem as illegitimate as the people who are paying them. So,
yeah, I mean, this is the Kochs, basically. This is the Koch family that runs Alec. This is this is where the money comes from. This is a family that goes way back to Russia in terms of its steel business, way, way, way back. The patriarch there certainly made a lot of his money under Stalin. It was mining steel in Russia. So, you could look at those roots with some interest. There's also this organization that we've mentioned. So, Cleta and her client, Steve Bannon's sister, are a part of this organization called Citizen of the American Republic. And this is the organization which mysteriously helped do the Build the Wall project for Steve Bannon, but it is also the organization that funded a lot of films that Steve Bannon produced on behalf of the Chinese government, it appears. Because these are films about China and Trump, and which is not something necessarily you would have done by yourself unless the money was maybe coming from China. So that's why I'm suggesting it might be that. These are what we were talking about earlier, some headlines to keep in mind. This is the same company that federal prosecutors have looked into in terms of those indictments that came down. And they're the ones that federal prosecutors wanted to shut down. They called it murky. And that's why we have a lot of this detail around citizens of the American Republic. You can see in its description there from a tax return that I pulled up. It says that they're involved in documentary and production and promotions. Citizens of the American Republic, COAR, provided initial funding for the production of documentaries, Trump at War and the Rise of Xi, to educate the American citizenry about economic nationalism and America First policy, foreign policy. And other key issues that were front and center across the nation in 2018. Expenditures included also the costs of promotion, screenings, events, travel, and educational material regarding the issues described in the documentaries. And then it goes media production and availability. COAR is dedicated to using not just conservative media, but also to promoting cause mission and principles through speakers and guests on mainstream media, which I guess means they would take other people that they could convince to be conservative and try place them on foreign media. Not foreign media, on more mainstream media, not just conservative media. But it is interesting that this is not, they got this $4 million here, $4,107,000 in 2018 out of nowhere. 2017, they had no money. Suddenly in 2018, bam, $4 million, which they used for all these expenditures, including traveling and all these other yada things. And you can see how the money splits out. Now, Cleta herself does not earn any money, but Mary E. Meredith is Steve Bannon's sister, earns money, $20,000, and Dad Fluette is the treasurer director. Now, you know him. Well, I know some people know him because he belongs to the Mercer family. He's the family bag man for the Mercer family.
Okay.
So
it's just Treason Corp Inc. Limited. Okay.
Yeah, basically. This is what we look at. So now this is the person, Cleta and Ginny, who claim to be independent, concerned conservatives about America, are in bed with Steve Bannon, who most of us believe is a Chinese asset of some sort, all the way back, 2017, but probably sooner, because we certainly know that Ginny and Bannon were in bed with each other for many, many years before. And these are the people who land up.
Metaphorically.
Yeah. Oh, yes, metaphorically. Yes.
Thank you.
Please, God. Please, God, metaphorically. These are the people that land up, overthrowing or trying to overthrow the Constitution and attempt a coup for Donald Trump. It's mind-blowing to me. It's mind-blowing to me that these people aren't behind bars.
Well, it takes a while to put them behind bars. And, you've got complicated, assuming that this is criminal activity outside of its its ultimate end, which is for coup d'etat, treason-y kind of thing, but there's also financial crimes that go into this. That was one of the big phrases that we got from yesterday's hearing was misappropriation of funds. Because that, if you induce fraud like that, if you cause people to make a payment thinking it's one thing and you turn it from your decision, you turn that money somewhere else and you don't tell the people where it's going, that's fraud.
It is fraud.
So.
I want to be able to play that incredible piece that they ran last night about how $250 million went missing as Donald Trump was fighting this supposed fraud in the election. But I did find the tape of Jared and others talking about what happened on election night. If it plays, which here it is, I think it's really interesting. And then we'll play the $250 million. And I think you'll get a sense by the end of all of this that these guys are just criming their way through this. Just a lot of crime.
Remember where you were on the night of the election, November the 3rd?
I was at the White House.
You know where specifically over the course of that night you spent your time within the White House?
There was an event that was organized in the residence, so I moved between the residence, a room sort of off the residence where some family members were.
I take it the president was upstairs in the residence.
He was upstairs. We were kind of on the first floor, so not upstairs. We were with mostly with Ivanka and her brothers and a couple other people who'd be coming in and out.
Can you just describe the atmosphere? What were people expecting that night when you got to the White House?
I think that there was, typically for people who show up there on election night, it's going to be a self-select, more positive environment. I think people were a little bit nervous, not knowing what was going to happen with the red wave or the red mirage as the debate was being carried out.
The Fox News Decision Desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Arizona's called. Do you remember that?
I do.
What do you remember happening where you were when Arizona was called?
There was surprise at the call.
Who was surprised?
Most everyone in the room.
Were you being one of them?
Yes.
Did that shift the atmosphere or the attitude in the White House?
Completely.
How so? Can you describe that?
Because Fox News was the first one to go out and say that.
So was it anger kind of directed towards Fox News for making a call more so than like disappointment that maybe the campaign lost Arizona?
All the above.
So both anger and disappointment.
Both disappointed with Fox and concerned that maybe our data or our numbers weren't accurate.
Were you in the White House residence during the sort of past midnight into the early morning hours of November 4th?
Yes, oh sure. It went over beyond midnight, yes.
Do you remember Rudy Giuliani being at the White House on election night and into the early hours the next morning?
I do.
What do you remember about when he came?
He was I had heard that he was upstairs, in that aforementioned reception area, and he was looking to talk to the president, and it was suggested instead that he come talk to several of us down off the map room.
You said that you had heard that Mr. Giuliani wanted to talk to the president and then he was directed your way. Did you end up talking to Mr. Giuliani when he was directed your way?
I did.
What was that conversation?
A lot of conversations were directed my way. A few of us, myself, Jason Miller, Justin Clark, and Mark Meadows, gathered in a room off the map room to listen to whatever Rudy presumably wanted to say to the president.
Was there anyone in that conversation who, in your observation, had too much to drink?
Like Mayor Giuliani.
Tell me more about that. What was your observation about his potential intoxication during that discussion about what the president should say when he's addressed the nation on election night?
And the mayor was definitely intoxicated, but I do not know his level of intoxication when he spoke with the president, for example.
Were you part of any discussions with the people I mentioned, Mr. Stepien, Mr. Meadows, or anyone else, about whether the president should make any sort of speech on election night?
I mean, I spoke to the president. They may have been present, but president spoke to the president several times that night.
There were suggestions by, I believe it was Mayor Giuliani, to go and declare victory and say that we won it outright.
It was far too early to be making any calls like that. Ballots were still being counted. Ballots were still going to be counted for days. And it was far too early to be making any proclamation like that.
I remember saying that, to the best of my memory, I was saying that we should not go and declare victory until we had a better sense of the numbers.
Okay, can you be more specific about that conversation, in particular what Mayor Giuliani said, your response, and then anybody else in the room's response?
I think effectively Mayor Giuliani was saying we won it. They're stealing it from us. Where'd all the votes come from? We need to go say that we won. And essentially that anyone who didn't agree with that position was being weak.
What was your view at the time as to what he should or shouldn't say?
I don't know that I had a firm view as to what he should say in that circumstance. The results were still being counted. It was becoming clear that the race would not be called on election night.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but we proud of the race we ran, and we think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this the next day or the next day, whenever we had something to say.
And did anybody who was a part of that conversation disagree with your message?
Yes.
Who was that?
The president disagreed with that.
Well, there you go. I mean, yeah, they're the most trustworthy people in the world, but even they're saying the president is the one who disagreed with that. Even they're saying that even though there was all this information, the president was the one who, the former president was the one who decided to go ahead with this crazy plan. Pretty
Sounds
damning.
about right. Yeah. I mean, it's, they're doing a good job making the case here. There was the intro, the overture, if you will, of, every president has agreed to give up power pretty easy, except for one. Let's tell you that story. And first is the big lie of the whole, well, we didn't really lose. Well, not only was that wrong, they knew it was wrong. And in a prosecution sense, that's really huge, because that establishes state of mind, that you are aware that you're committing a crime, that you're aware that you're not right. And especially if you're making statements to other people that are fraudulent, false in nature, then that further establishes that you're, conspiring with others to do something that you ought not do. So you have what the prosecutors would call mens rea. That's the mindset. And you already, with motive, is you don't want to go to prison, Right. So you got motive, you got mindset, and then you look at the actions that are taken. And I think we're going to get to that when we get to pushing Mike Pence to do something, and then again with the fake slate of electors. There are actions taken to create forgeries in furtherance of the conspiracy and arrange the attackers in furtherance of the conspiracy, not just in the United States Capitol, but in many, many state capitals. We talked about how on the same day of January 6th, there were paramilitary guys who went into the Missouri Capitol. I've talked to some legislators who were like, "Oh yeah, that was freaky," and then they didn't do anything because it didn't happen. That was organized out of here, and those action. Then eventually, you had the attack, and you had the attempt to obstruct this official proceeding. And what were they going to get for it? They were going to overthrow the American government. And that'll, that'd be a great, when we're done with that, maybe the American people will be ready for what the DOJ can tell them about the same thing, which is, all right, and here's why that's illegal. Because it's illegal.
They would have overthrown this constitution, they would have overthrown the government, and they would have made $250 million, which, a chump change. Here's the story from last night.
And kept the country and sold the country off for parts. I mean, all bad.
Yeah, all bad. But this is one piece that I just want to emphasize for everyone, because I think it is so important. It was really well done. It's the last clip I'll play from last night. People really need to pay attention to this. He stole $250 million. Donald Trump stole $250 million on this nonsense about the big lie, which was completely fraudulent.
I can never steal more than $30 million.
Senior investigative counsel at the House of
I can't even steal $30.
The January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Between Election Day and January 6th, the Trump campaign sent millions of fundraising emails to Trump supporters, sometimes as many as 25 a day. The emails claimed the, quote, left-wing mob was undermining the election implored supporters to, quote, step up to protect the integrity of the election, and encouraged them to, quote, fight back. But as the Select Committee has demonstrated, the Trump campaign knew these claims of voter fraud were false, yet they continued to barrage small dollar donors with emails, encouraging them to donate to something called the Official Election Defense Fund. The Select Committee discovered no such fund existed.
I don't believe there is actually a fund called the Election Defense Fund.
Is it fair to say that the Election Defense Fund was another, I think we called it a marketing tactic?
Yes.
And tell us about these funds as marketing tactics.
Just a topic matter where money could potentially go to be, how money could potentially be used.
The claims that the election was stolen were so successful, President Trump and his allies raised $250 million, nearly $100 million in the first week after the election. On November 9th, 2020, President Trump created a separate entity called the Save America PAC. Most of the money raised went to this newly created PAC, not to election-related litigation. The Select Committee discovered that the Save America PAC made millions of dollars of contributions to pro-Trump organizations, including $1 million to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' charitable foundation, $1 million to the America First Policy Institute, a conservative organization which employs several former Trump administration officials, $204,857 to the Trump Hotel Collection, and over $5 million to Event Strategies, Inc., the company that ran President Trump's January 6 rally on the Ellipse.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing.
The evidence developed by the Select Committee highlights how the Trump campaign aggressively pushed false election claims to fundraise, telling supporters it would be used to fight voter fraud that did not exist. The emails continued through January 6th, even as President Trump spoke on the Ellipse. 30 minutes after the last fundraising email was sent, the Capitol was breached.
I just want to emphasize that $5.5 million that went to the event company that set up the rally at the Ellipse that day. Fraud, corruption, leading to another corruption scheme, to another violent, seditious conspiracy. This is the loop of crime that we're seeing happen here. Yeah, rolling into each other.
Yep, sounds about right.
I don't know, Eric. This is to think that people think like this is kind of stunning to me. I mean, sometimes you think, okay, people have devious minds, but the fact that people would do this to their country, the fact that people will do this to the lives of the people that died that day, the fact that people don't care at all about the lives of the people that died that day, or the Capitol Police people who will have, PTSD for the rest of their lives. They don't care a thing because they want to make the money.
That's why they did this. Well, first of all, that's sociopaths for you. Sociopaths don't care. They take the money and they're bad guys. They're in every movie, pretty much. But that's why you needed all the propaganda to be able to convince the people attacking that they're the good guys. Now, most people that are in attack position think that they're the good guys. It's very few people that know that they're the bad guys when they're doing it. It's like, they're freedom fighters. If firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight? They needed this whole backstory of, we really won, when really you didn't. And in fact, you know what, you wouldn't have as much of the House or the Senate, or actually the Senate's not gerrymandered. That's almost a slip. But you wouldn't have as much of the House of Representatives without gerrymandering. There's a lot of leaning on the scales here, and it's like, no, this guy is not that popular, and the ultra right-wing stuff is considered ultra because it's a departure from general principles of governance that might have been called conservative before. And no, that's not a majority. It's not 70% of people that believe in these things. But you need the story to give the small slice of extremists who are going to go out and load up and do something as stupid as trying to attack the Capitol direct on.
You have to convince loyal patriots and American people to do stupid things by lying to them. Yeah, brainwashing.
Yeah,
that's how that's how you get this done.
And patriotism, patriotism means different things to different people. And, it's kind of a trope. There's a lot of people who have been convinced that, you can be patriotic by saying to yourself and others that only your perspective on America is what counts. So, and then anybody gets in the way of that, you can feel okay if you kill them because, they were getting in the way of progress or whatever. So, yeah, and that's kind of what happened here. We've talked about this. 25% of the people that actually were at the riot part of the attack had declared bankruptcy recently. And, that's people who feel hard done by and were no doubt profiled and, continually fed this message. But
a lot of people with mental illness as well were profiled in religious institutions and churches and identified as people that they could, radicalize to go to the events like this. So, this is a very deep-seated and really complicated operation that was done on America. And hopefully this is America beginning to wake up to this. I hope these hearings are actually breaking through. I feel like they might be, although yesterday's one I really wanted to see in prime time, which is why we were airing so much of it tonight. But when we raised the Mercer family again, I thought it was just important to bookend this because it was the Mercer family that actually brought Donald Trump to the White House. It was the Mercer family that Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway worked for, when Steve Bannon was still working at Breitbart. Those are the people who were ultimately the campaign chairman, I believe they called him, the campaign manager in the last few weeks there of the campaign in 2016. And the fact that Cleta Mitchell is, in a company with one of their bagmen and Steve Bannon, and she's the same person who's sitting on a call with the Georgia Secretary of State asking him to find him votes, the same person is working with Nelson at Lisa Nelson at ALEC on ways to make sure that Trump doesn't officially lose with the state legislatures. She's the same person who did this in 2016. There she is in 2020, still operating right next to Donald Trump.
Sure.
Can't be clearer than that. I don't think it's, we have not moved. We've not moved into a safer place yet. Certainly the GOP is not in a safer place when these people are still operating so openly and clearly within there. We're running out of time. Should I play this Roger Stone clip one more time? It's tiny, but he, it ties in so much
if
of
you must.
I know I don't like listening to Roger, but it does. They were talking about 30 minutes before the end there, 30 minutes before people had breached the Capitol. They were still sending out emails for fundraisers. Emails like this.
To help us have the impact we want, to change history, and to stand up for the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln, please go to stopthesteal.org. That's stopthesteal.org, and help us pay for the staging, the transportation, and most importantly, the security of our peaceful protesters. Thank you, and God bless you. I'll see you in Washington, January 6th.
Gross.
So the paying for the security, was that happen to pay the Proud Boys to show up?
I think so. I think that's exactly
what
it is.
The Oath Keepers to show up because, yeah, it's cool because that means you funded you funded some seditious conspirators.
You make a very good point. Well done, Eric. That is, in fact, I when I first listened to that, I was like, is he talking about the Proud Boys? It must be, because that was his security. Those are the people running around.
Security of our very peaceful murderers.
Yeah, who are going to basically storm the Capitol, be first past all the security perimeters to make sure that everybody else can follow them into the Capitol while the president he's still speaking. The president even hadn't finished speaking. There's a lot of corruption going on here, a lot of crime, and a lot of people that still need to be to answer for their crimes. And there'll be lots more this week as we get more hearings. So the one tomorrow was canceled just simply because there's so much work that goes into these hearings. They're not going to be ready for tomorrow's one. I was looking forward to that. That was going to be the corruption in the DOJ. The attempt to install a new attorney general. That is not happening tomorrow. But Thursday at 1 p.m., there will be another hearing, and this will be the Pence card, which they call it the Pence card because that's the original name that the right wing sort of came up for. This is Pence card meaning like the wild card. We're going to throw Pence in there and see if we can shift everything by throwing him in there. And of course, they couldn't. And of course, we know what happened. But we're going to find out in great detail how concerned they were for the vice president's life, how much pressure there was to get him to participate in this scheme, in this horrible, horrible scheme, and how he ultimately, did the right thing, which I guess, I would not have pegged the guy to do that at the start of the Trump presidency, and then there you are at the end, being a little surprised by that twist. On that note, I think we've done our grand service tonight. We've done our full hour. I know you've got to run. Anything else you want to share with our audience tonight? Anything else that's on your mind?
Too much. But we're still cooking up the brew here at Game Theory headquarters. So,
indeed, there's a lot going on. I'm going to leave with you with one longer last clip because I do think Liz Cheney sums it up very well. This is the opening remarks from the vice chair yesterday morning. I'm going to play the whole thing. It's worth your time because it really sets up what they were able to say yesterday and also what they're planning to do as the hearings continue over the next few days. On that note, we thank you very much for being here on Narrative tonight. And please, if you'd like to support us, we really do rely on all our patrons to create this programming, to fund this programming. You can go to patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative. We'll be back here on Thursday with the live coverage, probably not Thursday night, but with you live coverage at 1 p.m. on Thursday. That's Eastern time as the January 6th hearings continue. And we look forward to seeing you then. Have a good night, Eric.
Ciao.
My name is Amanda Wick, and I'm Senior Investigative Counsel with the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
Today, we will begin looking at the initial part of that plan. President Trump's effort to convince millions of Americans that the election was stolen from him by overwhelming fraud. A federal court has already reviewed elements of the committee's evidence on this point and said this, quote, "In the months following the election, numerous credible sources from the president's inner circle to agency leadership and statisticians informed President Trump and Dr. Eastman that there was no evidence of election fraud," close quote, sufficient to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The court's opinion methodically documents each of the principal reasons for that conclusion, and I would urge all those watching to read it. Today, we will begin to show the American people some of our evidence. Today, you will hear much more from former Attorney General Bill Barr's recorded testimony, and you will hear in greater detail what others in the department told President Trump, that his claims of election fraud were nonsense. You will also hear much more from President Trump's own campaign experts, who had also concluded that his fraud claims could not be supported. Let me focus briefly on just 3 points now. First, you will hear firsthand testimony that the president's campaign advisors urged him to await the counting of votes and not to declare victory on election night. The president understood even before the election that many more Biden voters had voted by mail because President Trump ignored the advice of his campaign experts and told his supporters only to vote in person. Donald Trump knew before the election that the counting of those mail-in ballots in several states would not begin until late in the day and would not be complete for multiple days. This was expected, reported, and widely known. You will also hear testimony that President Trump rejected the advice of his campaign experts on election night and instead followed the course recommended by an apparently inebriated Rudy Giuliani to just claim he won and insist that the vote counting stop, to falsely claim everything was fraudulent. He falsely told the American people that the election was not legitimate. In his words, quote, "a major fraud." Millions of Americans believed him. Second, pay attention to what Donald Trump and his legal team said repeatedly about Dominion voting machines, far-flung conspiracies with a deceased Venezuelan communist allegedly pulling the strings. This was, quote, "complete nonsense," as Bill Barr said. President Trump's own campaign advisors, his Department of Justice, and his cybersecurity experts all told him the same thing. Here, for example, is White House lawyer Eric Hirschman. His view was shared by many of the Trump team whom we interviewed.
I thought the Dominion stuff was, I never saw any evidence whatsoever to sustain those allegations.
And third, as Mike Pence's staff started to get a sense for what Donald Trump had planned for January 6th, they called the campaign experts to give them a briefing on election fraud and all the other election claims. On January 2nd, the general counsel of the Trump campaign, Matthew Morgan, this is the campaign's chief lawyer, summarized what the campaign had concluded weeks earlier, that none of the arguments about fraud or anything else could actually change the outcome of the election.
Generally discussed on that topic was whether the fraud, maladministration, abuse, or irregularities, if aggregated and read most favorably to the campaign, would that be outcome determinative? And I think everyone's assessment in the room, at least amongst the staff, Mark Short, myself, and Greg Jacob, was that it was not sufficient to be outcome determinative.
As is obvious, this was before the attack on the Capitol. The Trump campaign legal team knew there was no legitimate argument, fraud, irregularities, or anything to overturn the election. And yet President Trump went ahead with his plans for January 6th anyway. Mr. Chairman, hundreds of our countrymen have faced criminal charges. Many are serving criminal sentences because they believed what Donald Trump said about the election, and they acted on it. They came to Washington, D.C. at his request. They marched on the Capitol at his request. And hundreds of them besieged and invaded the building at the heart of our constitutional republic. As one conservative editorial board put it recently, quote, "Mr. Trump betrayed his supporters by conning them on January 6th, and he is still doing it." Another conservative editorial board that has long supported President Trump said last week, Donald Trump, quote, "won't stop insisting that 2020 was stolen, even though he has offered no proof that that is true." And this, Donald Trump now, quote, "clings to more fantastical theories, such as Dinesh D'Souza's debunked 2,000 mules, even as recounts in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin confirm Trump lost. Those are the correct conclusions to draw from the evidence gathered by this committee. We have much more evidence to show the American people on this point than we can reasonably show in one hearing. But today, we will begin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.